Well, good morning, everybody. I want to start off with a little more information about last week's severe weather outbreak, just to kind of give you some updates on where we currently stand with this severe weather season. And right now, back on the 14th, the unfiltered reports are up over 800, which included a lot of additional tornado reports and large hail reports from that massive outbreak of severe weather we had last week. So just wanted to kind of give you a quick look at this and then put it in the context of this year. So I'm going to show you a series of graphics which look back all the way to 2005 and how we accumulate reports of hail, wind, and tornadoes throughout the season, and the black line being the average. Now, we talked about this last year. There was a change in the reporting standards that happened. I believe it started around 2010, where we went from reporting hail at 3/4 of an inch diameter to an inch in diameter. So that's why there's a very large spread here. But using the new criteria of an inch, I just want to show you that we're already well ahead of the historic average. That one event really pushed us there. In terms of wind reports, we're sitting right on average, just a hair above it in terms of the pace. But remember, our biggest wind events typically happen in June, July, and August. This is the time of year where we get into the kind of the squall line setup in the flow of the atmosphere. And our tornado reports right now they're just a hair below the climatological average. But remember, the time period we really watch for this is April, May, into early June. That's where the central part of the United States really begins to light up with a lot of severe weather reports. So that's ahead of us right now. Just wanted to give you some stats on where we currently stand. Okay, big stories we're kind of following this week, just picking up where we left off last week. First is going to be the temperature discussion. This morning, much colder air. We're into that full omega blocking pattern into the western United States, and it's driven a lot of cold air out of eastern Canada straight down into this section of the United States. And the concern is going to be about tomorrow morning when we get a lot of that very cold air getting pretty far to the south. So what you're seeing here in this deepest shade is a freeze warning, and it extends here just to one county north of the of the Gulf of Mexico here in parts of Florida, and therefore we're going to be really dealing with it could be a short duration event in terms of the depth of the freeze, but it's going to get there. What's making this possible again is this pattern over the west, which really evolved from an omega blocking pattern to more of a high over low. Do you see that? So you have the high here and the low there, and so that allowed cold air to come into this trough, which is diving pretty far to the south. Now, in a moment, we'll talk about what's stacked up in the west here in the Pacific. That's really going to change the pattern going forward. But as it stands, temperatures are going to get pretty chilly. So I wanted to start off with that today. Here's Monday's low temperature. So we've already probably experienced these, of course, by the time you watch this video. But as we go into Tuesday morning, there you are. Watch that white line. I put a frost line on here. So everything on that line is 32 degrees or colder. And you can see that there's a pretty large area down here in the southeast that's going to get hit with a very, very late frost event. Now, I say it's late simply because of how mild it has been. It's actually not uncommon for us to get a late March shot of colder air down into this area. In a few minutes, we're going to talk about the longer range temperature outlook, but just to kind of give you an idea here, this is day 5 through 10. And day 10 through 15. So we're now locked into this cooler pattern for a lot of the United States going forward until I think we break out there past the first full week of April. Now, do you notice the kind of shape of the coldest air? It kind of looks something like this. That's day 10 through 15. You can really see it in the day 5 through 10. And what's important about that shape is kind of piggybacking off of what we discussed a lot last week. I think that this is going to be a corridor through which we're going to get a lot of snow. And if I could just kind of jump to that quickly, over the next 10 days, this is the new probability map from the European model showing the chance of getting 6 inches. All right, so we kind of talked about this mid to late, massive winter storm possibility. And now the models are starting to see that. So I need to explain how the pattern's going to be getting into this configuration. Hidden area with snow that has not seen it. So through Sunday, this is our season to date snowfall map. And we're talking about driving snow right into this corridor. And this is the one place that all winter long, save one event back in December. Remember that one right before Christmas at Minnesota? Okay. We just have not had it. So this is a significant event, and it's still panning out. I was watching it all weekend long to see if the models were going to continue to trend in that direction. So we better dig in and talk about that in a few moments as well. The second part about this is that that moisture from that snow that's coming into this area is also hitting a region that's been exceptionally dry for the last 30 days. Big sections of South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin haven't seen anything in the last 30 days. And we talked a lot last week about this Southern Plains region that I'm very concerned about filling in before we get into the risk this summer of drought in this area. I spent a lot of time on Friday. Thank you for watching that video on Friday. It was a lot of information. I appreciate you hanging on to the bitter end. But you know that one of my greatest concern areas for this summer is here. And then as we progress, throughout the summertime period, I don't know if it's going to be here or meander back and forth from here to the Mid-South into the Southeast, but that's currently my thinking as of mid-March as to where our greatest summer risk is going to be for heat and drought. I've got some new long-range information at the end of this video for you, and then throughout this week I'll stack it all up so we can really just digest it and see what's going on, at least in the projections, but that's a quick hit on what I'm thinking right now. Okay, the other story that we're going to finish with today is going to be the increase in the rainfall right into these critical areas that have been so dry. The European model went aggressively this weekend wetter through this region. We knew it was a possibility, right? We talked about how if the MJO swept over briefly into phases like 7 or 8 or 1, that we would increase the upper level support for rising motion for the monsoon, basically taking the cap off of it. I'm still going to tell you though, I don't think it's here to stay, and it's going to be critical for the success of this crop. But April rains are more important to the safrinha crop than March. All right, because April is when we're talking about being in pollination and then starting grain fill. So we're going to come back to that again as well. Okay, so here is where we are. Sun's trying to rise across the East Coast. And if we just take you back to yesterday, a couple of things to point out. You can see the upper level low that was still a part of it's now stacked. This high, I should rephrase that. Sorry, something fell behind me here. My kids were playing in the basement with my nephews over the weekend, and so things are a bit of a mess down here. But anyway, we have this north-south high over low setup, so it's not stacked. When we say the word stacked, I should reserve that for when you have something sitting on top of something else, not a north-south spread. But again, what we've got is look at all of the convection right around this low in Arizona, and it's just impressive to see this. Now, I got a picture of what some of the moisture that came out of this looked like over the weekend. I'm going to show it to you in just a few seconds here, but since the weekend, precipitation totals kind of came in, extremely heavy rains down here across parts of the south. I mean, you can just see we had a few severe storm reports also along the Gulf Coast. But this weekend was very, very wet in some key areas that I'm trying to just beat back the risk of drought as long as we can. But that upper level low sitting and spinning here, kind of ending this long stretch of very dry conditions in Arizona and New Mexico and southern Colorado and Utah and parts of Nevada and California as well. And a lot of this came in the form of snow. So this was through last night, but looking at the last 72 hours of total accumulated snow, some of these places, of course, enhanced by orography or the mountains here, picked up several inches of snow out of this following last week's major snow event that hit parts of Colorado. By the way, it was kind of interesting. You can almost see it under the cloud cover was too much. But we'll watch carefully to see how rapidly the snow melts in this area. But I mentioned a picture, and I wanted to show it to you. So this comes from a longtime viewer, great guy, Kevin White. He always sends me good updates from Arizona, and I really appreciate his information, especially come monsoon season. But he captured just a beautiful, this is a downdraft. These are fall streaks, and I imagine most of this is snow. Now, he said he was about 6,200 feet in elevation where he took this just on a quick weekend trip here. But Kevin, man, fantastic picture. Thank you for sending this to me. All right, so let's pick it up with a model and kind of trace this out as to where we think it's going to go. There's the high pressure in the middle part of the country, driving in the cooler air. It's also helping, the flow around these highs goes like this, so we're driving in some lake effect snow, a couple of decent snow squalls up here as well. So playing through the day today, the upper level low continues to spin over parts of Arizona. But outside of that, throughout much of the day today, getting into the early morning hours on Tuesday, there's not a whole lot going on. We do have the risk of some stronger storms in Florida, but outside of the lake-enhanced snow squalls here, we're going to get through Monday without too much going on across the country other than colder air. By Tuesday morning, a low curls up over parts of like Lake Superior, Lake Huron, Lake Michigan, where everything meets there. And again, just driving some more snow into the interior of New England. But it's going to be mid to late this week that's really going to capture our attention with the setup. And you can already begin to see by midday Wednesday where some of that snow could start to fall. All right. Now, what's driving this pattern overall is right here. We have 1, 2, 3 decent waves in the Pacific jet stream and plenty of momentum and no major signal of blocking save what's currently in place here. This high to the north of this low. And we don't expect that to last. Remember, we talked about it just being around to the middle of the week this week, which will give it about a 10-day life cycle over here in the west starting last week. And I think it's out. So here we go. This is the current setup today. All right, so there is this. There's the cold air that's driving in, and that's the guy we're going to watch right there. So if we play this forward, looking down on top here, this is through Tuesday into Wednesday. That little low sneaks out there by Thursday. We'll see what that one does. But then as we get into Friday and Saturday and Sunday, see this deep trough? That was the feature I just pointed out, this trough right here today. And that guy is diving into the west. And the new ensembles have dropped it all the way to, New Mexico and Texas. And this weekend, there's going to be enough cold air on the back side of this and the northern side of this to support snow. And it's going to dive through. It's probably going to push through the Midwest, go toward the Great Lakes. But we don't really lose that trough in the midsection of the country all the way through Thursday of next week. That's 10 days out. And then it doesn't quit. This would be Friday the 29th. That'd be Good Friday, getting into Easter weekend. And we still see here that there is a system, another one in the models with decent kind of agreement on that system coming through, Easter Monday. And I think we got an active finish to March. And that's been kind of the narrative we've had. What happens after that, I'll discuss in a few minutes. But can I kind of break it down several different ways? First, I'm going to show you the WPC forecast. And I'm going to make just a quick announcement. Over the next month, several of my maps are going to start to shift around in the way that you view them. I've been working on a much more efficient way of making maps so I can make a lot more of them, and also worked on some kind of new techniques, which is, I hope, going to be able to provide more regional content. And I'm going to show you a glimpse of that in a moment here. But this is the WPC's forecast for the next 7 days on total accumulated precipitation. I'm going to show you next the European model, the artificial intelligence version of this. And all the new map making stuff I've been actually testing out on the European model. So you're going to be able to get a lot of regional models, like a regional analysis like this, with overlays of numbers so you can kind of see what's to be expected. And just note that the European model, and most of this being snow in through here, is calling for up to, a half inch to maybe 3/4 of an inch of liquid in that snow. And we're going to have to talk about what comes through Iowa here because this is desperately needed. Now, remember, the artificial intelligence version of this tends to wash out the main features that could be driving this. So that's why you probably see, if I go back, higher amounts, up to 1.5 inches in the WPC in this region. Okay. That's liquid equivalent. Some of this is going to be snow. But let's go from there over to the European operational run. And this is just through the next 7 days. Again, picking up on that system. Now, I know I'm focusing a lot on this area. That's only because this is one of our driest spots. But take note what's coming up the East Coast. Watch what's coming into the West as well in these forecasts. And here's the GFS. So we're going to have at our disposal 5 or 6 different weather forecast models to combine and compare to really assess what we expect to come when. And remember, this is just the beginning. That's the next 7 days. As the GFS will show you, we've got more and more in store as we work our way toward, the first full week of April. So there's a lot going on, and so it's best just to stop for a moment and compare the models. The GFS and the ECMWF now. Soon, I think I'll have actually 4 different panels to compare. It might get a little too busy, but we'll see how that all works. All right, let's get through this. We've already seen through the middle of this week. And what we're watching for is this. Here we go. On Wednesday, some light snow spreading in through here. Heavier snow squalls still in the interior of New England, Ontario, Quebec, and on the Great Lakes. That's in both models. But as we work our way from Wednesday into Thursday, there it is, we start to see the heavier snow spreading into this area already by midday Thursday. To the south, I'm talking about the risk of maybe some stronger storms some locally heavy rain, and this is just the beginning of this pattern. So here we are on the 22nd and 23rd, so let's just walk that back. 21st, 22nd, 23rd. Now what this first system is likely to do is curl up right along the east coast. See this? It's in both models. Somewhere late this week, curling up there and possibly delivering really heavy rains to the southeast, up to the Carolinas, and then there'll be a tricky forecast next weekend for where we could see some snow in New England. But after that, remember last week I told you the 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, that was the time frame I was really watching. This is high pressure delivering some what we call antecedent cold air. That's the cold air ahead of the next system. And already by Saturday, it's plowing into the Oregon, California coast. And as it comes out on Sunday into Monday, look at the size of this system. It is in both models. While the position is different, there is a system late this weekend that starts in California and Oregon and finishes in the central United States by Monday. And that's the system that will have the cold air in place that could deliver really decent snows. And then that system curls its way east. And again, we'll be talking about the risk of strong to severe storms to the south and into the southeast as that system curls its way up and leaves. So again, quieter start to this week. We start watching Thursday, Friday for some activity. Then the weekend starts off with a system that rolls up the east coast and is then followed by one that hits the west coast that centers on the middle part of the United States by early next week. Okay, so let's go to that snow map and see what we've got. You've seen it already in the total precip. This is through Wednesday, Thursday. There's the first round following the snow that's around the Great Lakes. Now we get into Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and that's the European model solution on this. Now the European model also tries to put some ice in here, but overall that's the current corridor through next Tuesday where the model's putting down the heaviest snows. In addition, you get more in the Sierra Nevada, more in the Cascades and Northern Rockies, big time snows for Montana though, which need it through the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin. The GFS has got it there as well. If we just keep playing, the GFS reinforces it. That's a 10-day GFS forecast on snow. We're just going to look for the stripes. That's all we're doing. We're not looking for amounts. But the reality of this is that we've got good chances of getting good snowfall here. So the GFS ensemble gives us this probability of at least 3 inches of snow. And if I step it up to 6 inches, there you go. So look, just take a moment and look at the map. Probability of 6 inches of snow in the next 10 days. Here's the color bar. So that's a 50 to 80% chance here, much higher as you get back toward parts of Montana, Alberta, and British Columbia. All right, let's do the same thing, but for the European ensemble. And there it is, probability of 6 inches. Now I might as well just keep going up. That's 12, chance of a foot of snow. So it's non-zero in this area. And of course higher in the mountains. So this is it. This is a desperately needed push of moisture. And why I like snow is it comes in and it just takes a little bit of time to melt. And the slower the melt, the better the chances are of it getting into the ground rather than running off, right? So just important to see this coming through. All right, where do we land after that? Well, the jet stream isn't slowing down, nor is it showing any signs of blocking as we approach Easter. So here's Easter Sunday morning. So I don't know why we would talk about the pattern giving up on low pressure systems out here to finish March and to start the beginning of April, given that there is no signal right now of a blocking setup. Can you kind of just get the idea? The flow is coming across the country like this, no big ridges in place. And that's why all of the week 2 forecasts show wetter, wetter, and wetter. If there's a drier spot, it could be deep inside the trough where the coldest air will be, which will be in this part of the Canadian prairie. But overall, I think that's what we're looking at. So what are the temperatures going to do with all of this? Well, we know we've been here, right? This is since February. Everywhere that you see a number 1 means that since February 1st, it's the new warmest such time period on record. The warmth coming into the west is much needed. And if we look here at where we stand in terms of growing degree day anomalies since February 1st, we have some places that are up to 200 GDDs above normal in this section of the country. We would call that about 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks actually, early on spring in this section of the country while we're way behind here in the west. There's another way to look at it. This is the National Phenology Network map. We like to show these in spring. And just take note that in these areas, it's saying that spring is at least 20 days early. That's what they do, at least 20 days early. So just kind of an idea where what that warm air has been doing. Now, we know cold air is in place. How long does it last? Let's review that again. So I'm going to do high temperatures now because we've already looked at that frost risk. Monday's highs getting into Tuesday. It's a quick warm up there. Wednesday, Thursday. So there's some of that antecedent cold air I mentioned before we get into the weekend system. So there's Friday, getting into Saturday. This is all high temperatures, so expecting continuation of the melt of snow here on westerly winds. But then we know that as we get into the weekend, this system begins to take shape. This is on Sunday, much colder air already coming into Montana. That's where that stripe of snow is going to be. This is where the risk of the strong to severe storms is going to be. And it's also in the European model that day 5 through 10, see it right there, out to day 10 through 15, we keep some colder air around. Now, we've been asking, when do we think this is going to break? When are we going to get back over into the mild conditions? And my narrative has been, we've got to get through the first week of April, right? I've noticed that the CFSV2 has been quite similar with that, suggesting that April 1 through 7th is kind of the last kind of stretch of some cooler weather here. 8 through 14, kind of exiting toward the southeast, which means I think as we approach tax day, we will have mild air back in place and likely in place for the remainder of spring. The European model has a similar story. That's the last week of March. That's the first week of April. And then here's the second week of April. See the moderation beginning to take place. Now remember, the model's been pretty consistent with a holdout of some cooler air, not cold, but cooler air here. And we think we have a snow feedback issue in the west. This typically happens in spring, where it shows up a little cooler than it will be simply because of the snow that the model is accounting for. And we've got good snowpack in the west. We covered that last week. So what are we doing to finish up this video? Well, we know that the MJO has been a critical part of this, and we've talked for the last 15 days or so about its progression into the West Pacific, and then we've wondered if it's going to crash or spend a little bit of time in phase 8-1. The concern about coming over here into this part of the diagram is that you can get this look in April, right? So what it delivers is a little bit of cooler air to start once you get into April. So that's what happens if we move briefly into phase 1. As we start to move away from that, the question is, can we displace this trough? So just to give you an example, this is what it looks like in March in phase 1, and this is what it looks like in April. Sorry, I had those two slides backward. But we do know that if we come out of that, we start to move toward more mild conditions. So I, again, just think that we have to get through the first week of April before we just break back into, the mild air again for much of the United States. All right, that's going to be the narrative until I have evidence to overturn it. Okay, so thinking about this, I want to talk to you about South America next, because that change in the MJO is affecting South American weather in a big way as well. For weeks, we'd been in phases 5 or 4 or 3, and you can see that that's drier, drier, and drier. And we've talked about what that's meant by giving us this drier signal that's gotten worse in parts of Mato Grosso do Sul, even over towards Sao Paulo. You can all see that drier area for the last few months. Okay, that's where we've had some struggle for rain. But with the MJO sweeping its way around, by the time we get into next week, there's a lot of supporting a lot of upper level support in this area as the MJO resets back over to phase 1. So you say, well, show me that. So here we go. Phase 1, okay, all of the rising motion is here, here, and here. See, that's kind of 3 different spots. 1, 2, 3. And that's why we expect to see better rains coming back into this area. So rising motion turning itself into this. So this week, still a continuation of some drier conditions right into these key growing areas. But once we get past this weekend, into next week, watch it fill in. And we'll watch the trend on that carefully. I think the model's a little too aggressive with the rain, but it's basically trying to put down some heavy rains over parts of Brazil's safrinha crop that really desperately need it. But I don't think it lasts long, because if the MJO in fact does collapse and pop back out over phase 4 or 5, that means it comes out over here into, the April, first and second week of April. And if it does that, we've seen that the new forecast for the month of April continued that drier stretch in this region. So the question is, how much drier than average, and does it affect the safrinha crop? And that's going to continue to be our question as we go forward. Because the new long-range data, which was released over the weekend by the IRI Multi-Model Probability Forecast Group, continues to show that April, May, and June struggle with moisture in this area. That's another forecast suggesting that. And since we've got this up, I do want to show you globally what the new forecast from the IRI forecast modeling system does. Now, where does this come from? This is a statistical processing of the forecast from the NMME, which we covered last week. This is April, May, June, July. Now you can use the colors. So this is representing the probability of being drier than normal, and this is above normal. Now take note, the IRI is not, for most of the United States, calling for the risk of spring into early summer super dry conditions. If it's got one area to watch, I'd call it right in through here, which gets us up into like the Four Corners states. But as we go from May, June, July to June, July, August, the drier spots in the world are showing up a bit farther south into South America. And as we progress toward La Nina, look how wet it is in Indonesia and Australia. And then take note of this area right in through here, because from June, July, August to July, August, September, this is where we're expecting our hurricane season to really take off. And if it's right and has the convection sitting on the Sahel, this will kick off multiple African easterly waves and give us the risk of a very active hurricane season. I think, based off model evidence right now, that if there's drought risk, major drought risk in the U.S., it will likely be a late summer into fall event. And I'm going to put all of this together with all of the other models for you throughout this week to kind of make that big story. But with that, I'm going to wrap it up here and hope you all have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk tomorrow. Thanks.